Hey, hello, howdy, how you doing? Welcome to the Liberating Louisville Supercut, where we took the entire series and condensed it to a single video. So instead of having to watch each video one at a time, you can slap this bad boy on and get the entire experience in one easy viewing session. We've gone through and cleaned a ton of stuff up, along with adding a completely new soundtrack to make this a more unique experience. With that being said, sit back, grab some snacks, and I hope you enjoy an entire remastered edition of Liberating Louisville. Cheers. One of the most requested videos I get asked for on Project Zomboid is to make a series where I clear out an entire city. Since I've never attempted a project like this before, I figured the best thing to do was to scale up the difficulty immensely, so I went with everyone's favorite city, scaled the population up to insane, set the helicopter events to sometimes instead of once, cranked the become desensitized settings from 500 minimum to 5,000 with the maximum at 10,000 like a true epic gamer.
Where my gamers at?
For traits and occupations, I went with the Repairman for the 2 levels and 100% XP boost in maintenance, which, coupled with Fast Learner, is completely broken. For negatives, I went Slow Reader, Cowardly, Smoker, Prone to Illness, Conspicuous, Agoraphobic, Hemophobic, Slow Healer, High Thirst, Thin-Skinned, Weak Stomach, and Very Underweight. For positives, I chose Cat's Eyes, Dexterous, Outdoorsman, Fast Learner, Organized, Strong, Fit, Gymnast, Adrenaline Junkie, and Lucky. And at this point, I had 3 points left, so I said fuck it and went with Speed Demon and Wakeful. Because I'm a psychopath, I also chose to cuck myself one more time and start completely naked with 0 gear. Getting into things, I spawned in and threw on Life and Living while I looted the spawn house. Found some pasta, which was great for gaining weight, and found some clothing upstairs, including some fancy shoes. I found a pipe wrench in the bathroom as well, and with that, I stepped outside into chaos. It felt like a scene straight out of World War Z. Thousands of zombies on each block, grouped up or roaming wild. There was nowhere I could escape to that wasn't completely overrun. Originally, I had planned on trying to get into an apartment complex and would knock out the stairs if I found a sledgehammer, then use planks from disassembled furniture to platform my way around the city to various POIs. But that just wasn't possible due to the sheer volume of zombies that spawn here on insane population. With that plan off the table, I switched focus entirely, and my big goal for today became just making it to the outskirts of the city. There was no point in trying to base up near the heart of Louisville at this point, since there were literally thousands of zombies on each block, so my safest options became the southeast or the southwest mansions. The issue with the mansions is that they're quite literally across the largest and most populated city in the game. Trying to get there now would be near impossible, and trying to get there without pulling 20,000 zombies with me would make it even more difficult. Because of this, I chose the southeast houses, and began making my way over to them. After hopping the fence into one of the backyards, I began clearing out the zombies in the vicinity. This took some time since I was trying to stay somewhat stealthy, but by that evening I had cleared the backyard and house and began looting the house. I moved some non-perishable food upstairs as well as some skill books and a sewing kit that I found. Outside of that, I organized the kitchen so all my food was in one cabinet and then put all the perishable items in the freezer. I read through the magazines that I had acquired and finally knocked out for the day. That was until I woke up at 2 a.m. to glass breaking downstairs. I could hear a zombie outside my door, so I prepared for the worst and whipped it open. Luckily, there was only one upstairs that was pretty easy to take care of, but when I walked downstairs, I found 3 more already in the house, one breaking down my door, and a couple more stragglers in the backyard. I'd finished up with them around 3:30 and chose to hang out upstairs for a few hours since I wasn't tired enough to fall back asleep. As soon as I walked outside the following morning, I was greeted with what I presumed to be a small group, until it turned out to be something like 20 zombies that I was chaining around the next house down. This went on for some time, until I realized that this wasn't something I could win, in which case I baited the horde inside and then climbed out a window and snuck away. After moving north a couple houses, I chose one that looked safe enough and began picking off the zombies around it. My best weapon right now is my feet. Since I only have one wrench, my biggest concern right now is weapons. The best way for me to go about obtaining more was either to forage for spears or get lucky in a couple houses. On my first house of the day, I got incredibly lucky and found a hammer, a screwdriver, and a machete in full condition. After looting the rest of the house, I came away with some more skill books and a saw. I even managed to catch Life and Living before heading out, which leveled up my carpentry. After that wrapped up, I took the TV back with me since my original house didn't have one in it. I wanted to start pushing into the dead-end portion of the neighborhood, so I picked out the closest house and looted that one as well for the day. Now, one thing I'm finding myself struggle with early on is that there's always a ton of zombies hanging out inside of the houses. It's been rare that I find a building that only has like 1 or 2 zombies in it. Instead, it's like walking into one of those off-brand Mormon families with like 30 people living in each house. I managed to find a crowbar and 2 hammers here, along with some more food before heading back to my base. I was clearly exerted, and just when I thought the coast was clear, I came back to find a horde gathered in my backyard. I didn't want to risk fighting so many right now, given my Moodle situation, so I went in through the front door, managed to drop my food off in the kitchen unseen, and headed upstairs to hide in my room and pray that no one would hear me throughout the night. After waking up twice throughout the night to what I thought was nightmares, I realized the hard way that grabbing the hemophobic trait was probably the worst one I could have picked. This is going to require me to either wash my clothes every night or take beta blockers or booze to fall asleep. Anyway, day 3 was spent entirely clearing out the dead-end portion of the neighborhood, which was really only like 2 houses, but with the amount of zombies in each one, it took way longer than I would have liked to walk through and clear out each house and then loot it. This entire day was really just repeating the process of baiting out zombies, looting a house, bringing all that loot back to my safe house, washing my clothes, and then heading back on to the next one. A very slow but necessary process. After spending the day pretending to be a Karen on the local neighborhood watch, I had reached the last house, and immediately decided that it was going to be my new home. There were actually way more zombies than I anticipated here, so I spent a few hours taking care of them. And after that wrapped up, I circled back to my first safe house, grabbed all my shit there before dumping it on the second floor hallway. From there, I went through and organized each category. I split the 3 bookshelves into skills, magazines, and entertainment. Clothing, watches, and tailoring all went in the master bedroom. All non-perishable food went into the closest cabinet for now until I had time to set everything up, and medical supplies went into the bathroom. One thing that I'm continuing to do is completely underestimate the amount of zombies in a house. Like, just take a look at this. Watch how many zombies just appear out of nowhere in a seemingly quiet house. Moving on. Today's goal was garbage bags. I needed to make rain collectors so that I could wash myself every day to avoid spiraling into an anxious, depressive rage like a pissed off teenager. My big plan to get said garbage bags led me to the music festival up the road. When I got there were obviously way too many zombies to even consider fighting right now, but that wasn't even an idea I entertained. My plan was to hang on the outskirts and slowly group up a horde behind me so that I could hit all of the garbage cans in the area. This worked out perfectly, and by the time I finished my run, I had gathered 15 garbage bags. While I was on the way out, I decided to bounce from car to car to see if they had anything good in their glove box worth taking, when I found a truck that appeared to be in great condition with its key in the glove box for me. The only issue it seemed to have was that it was low on fuel, but I remembered seeing a couple gas cans in other cars, and worst case scenario, there were a ton of empty soda bottles in the garbage cans that I could take to siphon fuel with. The last thing I did today was head back to my old house where I took on the horde that I had baited inside a few days earlier. At this point, I had completely forgotten where I set the crowbars down at, as I can't seem to find them in my new safe house, hence why I came back here. Unfortunately, it was all for nothing, because I searched my OG house and didn't find them anywhere. Kind of a bummer, but I guess it is what it is at this point. After spending most of the following morning trying my best to hit carpentry level 4, Life and Living came in clutch at noon when I got the Carpentry Show, which boosted me past level 4 and a chunk into level 5. Also, I'm an absolute dumbass. All the stuff I couldn't find was sitting in the garbage bag, in a desk in the second floor of my new safe house. I must not have taken it out when I moved all my shit over, and just threw it in the desk because that bag said crafting on it. Anyway, full retard moment aside, I built out 3 rain collectors, which should, in theory, be enough for me, since I have a plan to get through nights now. I'm going to keep a clean pair of clothes next to the bed to change into at night. Then in the morning, I can put my bloody clothes back on. At least until I have enough water that I can afford to just waste hundreds of units of it daily. Either that, or I could probably just use a washing machine and dryer, but that's way too logical. Anyway, that was the main highlight of day 5. I spent the rest of my time just reading some skill books. The next target on my list was the fire station, which was located up the road a little past the music festival. I needed access from there to cut down trees for fortifications, so I set out early that morning. When I got there, I noticed a ton of zombies hanging around and figured now was a good time to put a dent in the population on this side of the city. Towards the end, I became exerted, but everything was going smoothly. That was, until I fat-fingered Q and pulled a whole separate group of zombies in. And luckily, it was only a smaller group, and I was able to take them out pretty easily as well. I can also see this becoming my base as I continue to push into Louisville. It's got a helipad on it, and I could build platforms from here to the neighboring buildings as escape plans if needed. Also, it's got a great view. Anyway, onto the main building. There were some small pockets of zombies out front that I had to clear out before getting in, and when I finally got inside, it was loaded with zombies. Obviously, those needed to be taken care of before I could start looting, so here you go. And this took way longer than it should have. All things considered, the exertion really took a toll on me here since it started to take 8 or 9 hammer swings to finally kill a single zombie, but eventually, I was able to whittle them down and finish them off. After looting the first floor, I was up to 6 axes, another crowbar, a few pipe wrenches, and a propane torch. I also found an industrial propane tank, but decided to leave it here for now, since it would be way too risky to try to carry that back while the roads weren't cleared. I got up to the second floor and cleared out the remaining zombies before diving into the medical room to drop my gear off. I'd be sleeping here for tonight since it was already getting late and I was completely exhausted. After waking up very early the next morning, I decided to risk it and head back to base severely over-encumbered. This worked out about as well as you'd expect it to and saw me max up my exertion while being tailed by about 25 zombies. I only had one real plan for this situation, and it involved me getting back to my original safe house. If I could get there, I could shut the door behind the zombies, sticking them up against it, while I snuck out the front door and around the fence back to my new safe house. I really can't believe that actually worked. Well, aside from one straggler, but he was an easy cleanup. From there, I spent the rest of the day doing a mix of recovering and contemplating if I wanted to take a chance and move my base up to the firehouse, which would basically mean I just pulled an incredibly stupid move, almost killing myself in the process, for absolutely nothing. And after sitting on it for a bit, I decided that if I was to move back up there, I would need to do some serious zombie clearing if I was going to have any chance to move. This would involve clearing out some of the roads, it would have to be the music festival, and the woods to the east. All before I even thought about driving my car up there. But I'm an incredibly stubborn person, and once I have an idea, it's really hard to get me off of it. So, the following morning, I would begin the process of capturing and fortifying the fire station. Now, as much as I'd love to, I can't just load up the truck and drive into the fire station. The truck would pull literal thousands of zombies, and I just don't have the resources to deal with those numbers yet. My plan for today was to head back to the music festival and slowly begin working my way up the street from there. I'm sure this is going to take several days, and we haven't hit a helicopter event yet, so I'm 100% positive that, with my luck, we'll spend all this time clearing out the area just for a heli event to replenish every zombie that I kill. But I guess we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. For now, I'm just going to focus on the task at hand, no matter how blurry it is. I didn't have to look too hard to find my first horde, which was just loitering around the main road. After taking care of them, I dipped into the nearest house to rest up and clean my clothing. I came up with a plan involving me pushing into the music festival and spam shouting to pull in zombies, but I think I still need to get some more points in my nimble skill before trying to take on any larger hordes. What I tried to do instead was work my way through the area, picking off the stragglers before eventually dealing with any smaller groupings that had stacked up inside the gates. During one of these encounters, I had what I can only describe as the luckiest moment of all of my time playing Project Zombie. When I got grabbed by a zombie, proceeded to fall into a group, get up with only a scratch on my leg, and walk away. After bandaging the scratch on my leg, it was right back into the action. spent all day trying to clear out all the zombies from the music festival, but by late that afternoon, I was exerted and becoming tired. I chose to just fall back to my safe house for the night and continue the push tomorrow. I know there's still a ton of zombies in the woods east of the music festival as well, so my goal for the 17th was going to be to start clearing them out to make moving to the fire station just a little easier. Like you just heard me say, my focus the next morning was the woods across the street from the music festival. There's not really any groupings, but there's a ton of individual zombies that could easily form a horde if they hear my truck driving down the road. One item I brought along today as well was a gas can, so that I could siphon fuel from any of the cars I found in the parking lot. After clearing out a pretty large chunk of the woods, I rested and washed up before making my way back to the music festival parking lot. After gathering some fuel, I found a van from the Kentucky Herald that looked to be in good condition, with the keys sitting in the ignition. I chose to dump my siphon fuel into it and start it up, giving me 2 vehicles. Now, there's a gas station near the fire station, but I can't imagine it'll be easy to access, so it's not feasible right now. I turned my attention back to the music festival for one very specific reason here. On day 1, when I was making my way down to the neighborhood, I noticed a generator sitting in the northwestern corner of the festival, inside the fencing. Luckily, I didn't have to look too hard and managed to find a second generator in the center of the gated area. Of course, I couldn't just grab it though, as a ton of zombies had noticed me and had begun making their way over. After dealing with them, I grabbed the generator and went back to a zombie that I had killed earlier to find a pair of scissors, because I had found a booth inside the festival grounds that held a ton of leather jackets that I could shred and use for strips. After arriving back at the base that evening, I began packing up and loading everything into the trunk of my van. I feel like after 2 days of heavy combat, we should have an opening to get to the fire station, and we can start clearing out cells from there once we're all set up. That being said, I think this is a good place to stop for now. So far, we've secured a small neighborhood, and we're right on the cusp of pushing into the fire station to take it over and turn into our main base for the next few months as we begin slowly pushing into the city. We still have a lot of work to get done here, but we've also made a lot of progress and have really set ourselves up for endgame already, which is insane to think about. A lot of this is dependent on getting established first. I could just run into Louisville and fire a bunch of guns, but there's no real chance of me completing this challenge with that method. If I want to have a chance of clearing out all of Louisville, I need to be smart about how I do it. This is a long-term goal, and to achieve that, I need to complete my short-term goal of creating a secure area for me to retreat to if needed. Today was the big moving day, and if you think that's boring, just hang on, because while unloading my van, I got a little audio cue. What absolutely perfect timing to start off a video with. Panicking, I wasn't really thinking on my feet, so I just started baiting all the zombies into the music festival grounds. This worked, at least in theory, as I could get them away from the fire station, but what I didn't think about at the time was that it only expanded the heli range, and only ended up pulling more zombies toward me because of that. and I spent the next few hours looping around the inside of the festival grounds waiting for the event to pass. And finally, when I thought it had flown away, I began moving back towards the fire station. And as if this game wasn't bending me over enough already, as soon as I got onto the main road, the fucking thing came back, pulling even more zombies over. And at this point, most of the cell was completely overrun, so I looped behind the fire station and then hopped the dog fences to get inside the garage, where several zombies were waiting for me. After taking them out, I ran upstairs and began unpacking while praying other zombies didn't hear me. And at this point, the first heli event had officially ended, but I had heard glass breaking downstairs, meaning that at least a few more zombies had gotten inside and were looking for me. I was getting tired, so I decided to just play it safe and hide out upstairs for the rest of the day, dipping back into the medical room and falling asleep there. First things first, I need to secure the area. The heli event brought hundreds of zombies, and I need to figure out just how much damage was done. And after waking up the next morning, I geared up and walked downstairs, and to my surprise, the station was mostly clear, with only a couple zombies hanging around the fitness room. After looting the large backpack from a corpse, I swapped my gear out upstairs before venturing outside. And at first glance, there's not nearly as many zombies as I was expecting, at least on the eastern side of the station. I chose to just start with the construction site and work my way west around the building since it seems like most of the closest zombies are in this part of the cell. I know there's a ton of them hanging around the campground that I'll have to deal with eventually, but I'll need better gear before I start that project up. This was pretty simple work then, all things considered. There were no real hordes, just a couple groups hanging around that I was able to take out relatively easily. After dropping off some loot and resting up, I pushed west down the road. The second group in the west had a zombie survivor that I was able to loot a gas mask and a bandolier from, which made me feel like a badass. I made a stupid play at around noon when I was trying to get in through the back door, without checking first, and got insanely lucky when I got grabbed but managed to get away with only a scratch on the neck. Nothing too exciting happened after that. I found a liquor store and was able to loot 7 bottles of bourbon, which I could use as Molotovs, but when I went to leave, I walked into a smaller horde, and not having the stamina to fight them, I chose to fall back to the construction site and loop around back into the station where I rested up for the rest of the day, reading some skill books to pass the time. At around 9 PM, I heard more glass shatter, meaning more zombies were entering the fire station that I'd have to deal with tomorrow. Or today, since they want to stare at me creepily from across the room. For some reason, I keep getting the feeling that the zombies think the fitness room is their own personal group workout class. Today was basically the same as yesterday in terms of objective. I need to get the zombie situation under control if I want to have any chance of long-term survival here. On top of that, the power is going to go out soon, so I'll need my rain collectors, some fuel, and a generator magazine before I consider myself truly set up. I spent most of the morning and early afternoon clearing out and looting the half-built houses nearby. I know I touched on it last episode, but it's still catching me off guard with just how many zombies are in each house. I was expecting maybe 1 to 3 zombies in every building here, and somehow there's just like 15 mulling around. After a few hours of repeating this process, I came away with a couple more weapons, some crafting materials, and 2 welder masks. As I was headed back to the fire station, I got ambushed by a horde waiting outside of the entrance. I was in no position to fight them, so I baited them east on the other side of the fire station and lost them over by the porta potty. At this point, it was raining out, and I still had my water barrels back in the neighborhood. Now, I wanted to get them moved up here, but there really wasn't a point since they'd most likely be destroyed by zombies anyway before I could use them, so I chose to leave them there for now and would have to head back another time to pick them up. After resting up, it was only 5 o'clock, so I decided to head back out and finish off the horde that I had baited around earlier by forming a crowbar conga line and letting them walk directly into my swings. And after that was done, there was really only one other group left to deal with, and that was the zombies hanging around the tennis courts. Now, my favorite moment of this instance was that I found Tammy from the 1,000 Pound Sisters just mulling around the tennis courts. Today was probably my riskiest day. I don't know how much longer I'm going to have power for, and I have low fuel in both vehicles, all my cans are empty, and my generator is empty. In short, I need fuel. There's a gas station a little up the road that I needed to take a chance on, and I chose today to do so. My plan was simple in theory. I started off by grabbing most of the zombies by honking my horn and then luring them into the mall parking lot. From there, I circled back through an alley and parked the van by the gas pumps, where I got out and started taking on the stragglers. What I didn't anticipate, however, was the wandering hordes that had begun making their way over, forcing me to wrap around the dentistry. On my second attempt, I started off hot, but ended up attracting more zombies again, forcing me east through a back door and directly into a group of zombies inside. This was pretty stressful, but it was either fight the zombies inside or die outside, so I took my chances, did the Ash Ketchum hat flip, and got to work. The next sequence is pure chaos, so I'll just let it play out sped up because it'll do a better job showcasing the events that unfold. Crazy enough, this wasn't even the end of the day. When I finally got back to the fire station that night, a horde had gathered out front, forcing me to confront them before I could get some rest, which turned into an event in and of itself. I wanted today to be my final day of zombie clearing, so I got to work early. The goal is to wrap this up so I can start working on building out fortifications for when the next heli event takes place. I did get a big win early today when I found a shotgun on a zombie. Now, all I need is some ammo and we'll be set to start leveling Amy. At 7 AM, the zombies began implementing Viet Cong tactics and came out of the trees to nearly end my run. Other than that, it was generally more the same. I did a loop around the perimeter and pushed pretty far outside of my base to try and find any hidden groups just sitting around. The next few days are pretty boring, so I'm just going to lump them all together. I spent most of this time just cutting down trees, using sheet rope to create stacks of logs, and then moving them outside of the fire station. I needed a shit ton of logs to build out my fortress, so that's what I did, outside of fighting the occasional zombies that would wander over to see what this lunatic with an axe was up to. I'll have some clips on screen now, but it was basically just the same thing all day, every day. Eventually, I realized I was making this way more complicated than it needed to be, and just drove the van out into the woods. After chopping down a ton of trees, I'd stack the logs near the van and then load them in. Fill my inventory, and drive back to base instead of taking 5 stacks at a time. Now the real unspoken hero here was my maintenance skill, which was level 5 when I started, meaning I could spend multiple days cutting down trees before breaking a single wooden axe. I think the most annoying portion of this project wasn't even the whole chopping trees down. No. It was all the fucking zombies that would just wander over. Normally not a problem until you piece together that I'm at max exertion and almost always tired in some capacity since I'm literally just chopping down trees for 12 plus hours a day, which means it takes like an hour in game to kill a single zombie. Finally, after 3 days of chopping trees, I began prep work on walling in the fire station. I'll need a couple levels still and some hinges to make gates, but I should be able to get the walls up with no problem. I'm not planning on doing anything special right now, just placing log walls along the perimeter. Eventually, I'll add stairs and a walkway along the wall to monitor and take out any zombies that wander over, but the walls should be more than enough for now as long as no heli events trigger. Oh, this is completely unrelated, but I also collected like 41 tree branches to use as spears if I really become desperate enough for weapons. I probably won't need them, but you never know. Building the wall took most of the day, but I was able to complete the entire process by that evening. All I need now are some gates, which I need another level and a half in carpentry to get to. After securing the perimeter, I turned inward for some additional protection by closing any choke points or open windows. I plugged all the windows in the fitness room and built out frames in the main hallway. The next day, I went out and smashed some doors for hinges and doorknobs, which I used to build out 2 doors in the main hallway and garage entrance. After that, I gathered a ton of planks and built level 2 walls in the interior before wrapping up my day by barricading all of the windows in the garage. So far, we're at 831 kills after surviving for just under 20 days. Here's what my skills look like if you're interested in that. We added levels in sneaking, light-footed, short blunt, long blunt, and maintenance, and I'll look to keep grinding blunt weapons since they're the most readily available, and there's buildings we're going to look to hit up which should give us enough long blunt weapons to carry through the rest of the series. Louisville has some of the largest weapon caches in all of Project Soundblade. There's police stations, gun stores, hardware stores, 2 malls, a baseball bat factory, multiple military checkpoints, and a bunch of pissed off gun-toting rednecks who left all of their shit in their house when the apocalypse happened. All of these will need to be taken advantage of if we want to succeed in clearing out Louisville on insane population spawns. In between then and now, I got hit with several days of massive thunderstorms, so while waiting for them to pass, I grinded out tailoring level 1 so that I could upgrade my backpack for more slots and higher carrying capacity. I also cleaned up my living area and spent some time on the treadmill trying to work on fitness a little more since I'm only level 5. I managed to level up my carpentry to level 5 by disassembling some extra furniture, managed to head out and retrieve my truck from the neighborhood safe house, and then spent some time grinding out metalworking by disassembling some of the metal chairs in the office rooms. The water finally shut off as well, which means the power is going to go out any day now. Today we'll be doing something incredibly stupid. Today we're going to go and head into the mall in hopes of looting the gun store on the northern end of the first floor. Believe it or not, but I actually have a pretty good plan as to how I'm going to accomplish this. That doesn't involve me just bum rushing in and getting insanely lucky. No. If I've learned anything in my time playing Project Zombie, it's that any problem can be solved with enough fire and explosions. So today, I've created a campfire kit, 5 Molotovs, and grabbed enough vitamins to induce a cocaine bender like no other, and have begun making my way to the northern side of the mall. The big brain play here is to set the campfire up a couple tiles away from the door. This way, the zombies will be able to walk through it and catch on fire, without me accidentally torching the entire mall in the process. I'm expecting thousands of zombies here, so if this all goes according to plan, this should be the largest kill count of the series so far. After arriving at the northern end of the mall, I cleared out the zombies loitering by the door. After that was finished, I placed my campfire on 5 or 6 tiles away from the door, took a deep breath, opened them up, and walked inside. My only goal right now is to pull as many zombies outside as possible, and I really only had one method for this. After I'd gathered a couple hundred zombies, I booked it down the back hallway, making it outside and lighted the campfire moments before a massive horde came spilling out into the open. Over the next several hours, I continuously grouped the zombies into a massive ball of fire and looped them through the campfire. Zombies would continue to roam out from the mall and either directly into the campfire or through the various fires starting to spread into the grass and bushes around the area. Once the main horde was effectively turned to ash, I took some time to kill the stragglers. Now that the first wave is completed, I went around grabbing any ripped sheets I could so that I could add more fuel to the fire, which I was prepping for a second round. I headed back into the mall at around 3:30 to see how infested it still was. Spoiler alert, it was still completely overrun. After spam shouting for another 30 minutes or so, I began pulling the second horde outside. The only problem right now, I didn't have time to light the campfire. This is why I brought Molotovs. Instead of creating this giant conga line of zombies, I tried my best to group them into as tight of a ball as possible before yeeting a Molotov into them. After the explosion, it was business as usual. A ton of baiting zombies around until they got tuckered out and then went to sleep in the grass. One of my favorite aspects of this strategy is watching all the zombies start dying all at the same time. After wrapping up at around 8 o'clock, I was anxious, hungry, and thirsty, so I took a chance and went back in for a third time. Looks like I did some damage to the building, so here's to hoping that it doesn't spread too far west. There's a couple restaurants right inside the northern doors, so I hit one up to wash up, grab some food, and fill up my water bottles. As I was heading back, I decided to take one last walkthrough just to see how we were doing and if there was any damage being done. And to be honest, the damage was extensive, to say the least. Miraculously, the gun shop wasn't up in flames yet, so on a whim of prayer, I spam screamed one last round, collected up a whole nother horde, which was just a mashup of normal zombies, and zombies that were completely inflamed, before pulling them out the same entrance that I'd done the 2 other times.
Good morning, savvy shoppers. We are pleased to announce that mall is now open for business. We hope you enjoy your time here with us today as you sample our many fine goods and services. The fun never stops and the deals just keep coming.
At around 2 a.m., I wasn't pulling nearly as many as I anticipated, so I looped around to the eastern entrance, and it looks like I'm doing more harm than good here. I tried to put in some work and clear more out, but wasn't having much luck, so I moved back outside, and at 3:30, ended up burning myself while stomping on a zombie. At this point, I decided to head back home since it was too difficult to move around, and I didn't want to risk dying because I could barely walk. I woke up around noon the following day and did some tasks around the base, cleaned and rebandaged my burn, and then began working on organizing my garage some more. It was a peaceful day for once, and everything was going smoothly. Until around 3 p.m. when a second heli event triggered. Initially, I figured I was completely screwed, but I was able to deal with the small amount of zombies that had accumulated at the western entrance. I made my way over to the eastern entrance shortly after and fought to secure that as well. The heli event did come back at around 5:30, but it didn't bother me too much. I had faith that my walls would hold, at least until the event passed and the zombies moved on. I went downstairs to swap out my bloody clothes and noticed that the zombies had broken through my walls by the tennis courts. I retreated back upstairs because of that, but unfortunately a couple zombies had seen me and I could hear them pounding against the garage doors and some of the barricaded windows below me. At around 7:30, I heard glass break and watched some zombies walk in through the main entrance, meaning that they'd finally breached the building. I still had some walls that I had built last episode that would hopefully keep them occupied for the night, and with that, I moved into the side room off the medbay and held out there for the rest of the night. Well, my leg is still fucked, so I don't want to risk fighting more than 2 zombies at a time right now. I can hear zombies below me walking around and looking for me. I don't really have many options right now. I can either head downstairs and try my best, which will most likely end up in me getting killed, or I can hide out of sight behind 2 doors in a windowless room, and wait another day or so for my burn to heal. I chose option 2 just to play it safe. I have plenty of food, but nothing to really entertain me, and I'm sure I'll run out of water eventually. I'm not too worried about the boredom or depression though, since I have a couple books and magazines sitting over in the living quarters that I can read to get rid of those moodles. There really wasn't much in point of me smoking either, since I was already severely depressed. By late afternoon and early evening, I could hear zombies in the upstairs hallways or kitchen area, so there was no point in leaving the room, at least until the following day. Burns take several days to heal, especially when you have no levels in first aid yet, so I just have to sit and wait it out. I think if I can get to a point where I can at least walk at half speed, I'll be fine with taking on the zombies in the fire station. With all of my progress seemingly undone in the span of 3 hours, locked in a side room with a burned leg, in a building completely overrun with zombies, I think it's time to finally start working my way out. This is my way of saying,
we've been stuck up here for 3 days.
First things first, I confirmed that the second floor was clear, which was surprising because I could hear them clearly right outside the medical room. Anyway, next step was to take care of the moodles. I read 2 books to get rid of the depression because apparently reading The Great Gatsby 2 times in a row does that, smoked a cigarette, and made my way downstairs. Luckily, my interior fortifications did their job, and the zombies were confined to the main entryway of the building. And by that, I mean they all clustered at the door and swarmed me when I opened it. I did catch a lucky break here though, when one got stuck on the wall and another got stuck hitting the door, essentially stopping a flood of zombies from just walking through and taking me down. After dealing with most of them, I walked through the door and got DP'd by 2 zombies, walking away with a scratch on my left hand, thankfully avoiding a run-ending bite here. I was able to get a scope of the surroundings, and the damages weren't all that bad actually. The horde had gathered on the western end of the compound, but for the most part, only a couple walls had been broken in the event. I headed back upstairs to grab some bandages since I only had ripped sheets on me, but since I was still struggling to walk, I chose to just play it safe again today and hang out at the fire station. The horde hadn't seen me, so I should be safe as long as they all just don't walk straight into the building. The rest of the day was pretty quiet. I changed clothes to prevent myself from becoming anxious, and then hung out upstairs, organizing my gear some more before taking sleeping pills and heading off to bed. After waking up the next morning, I noticed that I could finally move around with a hop now instead of at a snail's pace. So with that knowledge, I geared up for the day, and headed back outside to take care of some of the remaining zombies in the area. This obviously took most of the day, and I found myself venturing into a nearby neighborhood and pulling zombies from there as well. There actually weren't as many zombies in the compound as I thought. Most of them resided near the construction site, or on the western side of the wall. When I got back to the fire station that evening, I removed the dirty bandage to find that my burn had finally healed, which is huge for us going forward. And the following morning, I woke up to the realization that the power had finally gone out. After 28 days, it would seem that my luck finally ran out. I had a generator downstairs and a can of gas that I could use to fuel it, but I still need a generator magazine to make it work. I'll look for that another time though. For now, it's time to finish what I initially started, so it's back to the mall. Heading back inside to assess the damage, the fire was actually starting to die out. I didn't want to group more zombies through it since I needed to let it fizzle out before it burned down too much of the mall. So I focused on the zombies in the food court, pulling them outside along with one zombie that was already on fire, and burning down the northern end of the food court in the process, but successfully pulling the majority of the zombies in this area outside. The big issue I was running into at this point was that the fire in the courtyard was spreading, which is great if you have a massive horde, but if you're trying to navigate the area and prevent a massive building collapse, it's a huge pain in the ass. After speeding up time for an hour, it was becoming pretty obvious to me that I completely fucked the food court. The fire was just continuing to spread through the seating area, and that would probably begin to spread into the main section of the mall, meaning I was running out of time. I chose to flank back around to the original northern entrance and check out the damage again. It appeared that the fire was out in the interior, but the damage to the walls was spread down the entire northern section of the mall. There were still a ton of zombies hanging around as well, but I had a sinking feeling that the surplus store was completely in ashes. I'd have to make my way there still to see just how bad it was, so I did just that, instead of focusing on the zombies. Clenched cheeks, I worked my way over to the surplus store to see that only the back end had been burned down, leaving the front half of the store unlooted and available for me to take. With a new goal in mind, I began grouping up the zombies to lead outside. The plan was to lure them away, then loop back around and climb through the rubble in the back of the store. The surplus store was fairly covered in ashes and zombies. I didn't want to risk fighting so many in such a tight space, so I spam shouted and pulled at least most of the zombies out into the field with me behind them all. From there, I grouped them up before pulling out a Molotov and letting fire do the work for me. After trying for several hours to successfully loot the store, I gave up and just started spam shouting again to pull any nearby zombies out of the mall. The big problem here is that there's one wall that burnt down between the back and the front of the surplus store, allowing for any zombie from the mall to just hop through the shattered window, through the burnt down wall, and into the back room where I'm trying my best to loot a single gun. After burning through a large horde, a small cluster of zombies had accumulated just inside the walls. I pulled them out, but it wasn't worth using another Molotov on, so with my only remaining weapon of the journey, I took out my butcher knife and carved through the group. By this point, it's really late, I can't see well, and I'm dying of thirst. I could have headed back and continued in the morning, but mama ain't raised no bitch, so I looped back through the eastern entrance into a Spiffos that was currently dealing with a small fire problem. From there, I found the bathrooms and took care of the whole thirst issue before heading back to the mall to get another look at the gun store. When it became apparent I wasn't going to get through by just walking there, I pulled yet another group out into the courtyard to continue the burning process. Eventually, I decided to loop around once the sun came up and give it another shot, but barely made it into the back room before I, once again, got swarmed and was forced to do something that I can apparently only manage to do in PZ, and pull out. Get it? Because I have a kid now?
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
All terrible jokes aside, I did see a zombie with an M16 as a leg, so I went against my better judgment and started working through each zombie one by one with my meat cleaver before deciding to just hop in the van and run them over Caitlyn Jenner style.
Buckle up, buckaroo!
And finally, after days of work and thousands of zombies burned, I was finally able to loot the surplus store. Or rather, what was left of the surplus store. Of course, it's never as simple as just heading back to base. At least not yet, since I'm still pulling zombies back in because I don't have any gates. After everything was said and done, days and days of work and recovery and heli events and all the chaos that comes with Louisville on Insane Pop, I came away from the mall raid with 5 rifles, an M16, 2 pistols, and 38 boxes of ammo. I also grabbed a bulletproof vest and some padded clothing for the winter. Eventually, I'll build out an armory to store all of this, but for right now, it'll be fine in the pile on the floor. With a little bit of time left in the day, I hopped in the truck and set out for my neighborhood safe house to collect the rain collectors. I chose to place the rain barrels on top of the helipad because that just made the most sense to keep them out of the way. Now all we have left to do is wait for the rain to come, and we'll be able to sustain ourselves indefinitely. Last episode, we recovered from a second heli event and managed to finally get into the military surplus store inside the mall, coming away with a couple weapons and a considerably small amount of ammo. You see, the power is out now, and I need a generator magazine to get this place up and running again. I also need some more skill books for carpentry so that I can finally build gates for my compound. With all that being said, today we're going to go raid the public library in our epic quest for knowledge. The plan here is way more simple than most people would ever like it to be, because I find that making convoluted plans only works until you step outside of your base and have to actually interact with the world. Truth is, I have no idea how many zombies are out here, but I do know that the bookstore has a great chance of having what I need, and it gives me an excuse to shoot some guns. All in all, this can be broken down into a 3-step process.
This is step 1!
Get to the bookstore, either by car or on foot. Preferably by vehicle, but let's be real, it's probably much easier, albeit slower, on foot.
What is step 2?
Loot the bookstore. I don't need much, really just the generator magazine, but it'd be nice to actually come away with this with the skill books needed to farm some levels like first aid and carpentry.
3!
Get home. I know, much easier said than done, but that's why we keep it simple. We'll figure out the nitty-gritty elements later. For now, just enjoy the chaos. The only predicament I have right now is that I only have 8 boxes of shotgun shells, which is like 200 shells. It may sound like a lot, and maybe it is in Riverside or Rosewood, but out here, it's not even enough to clear a neighborhood, let alone one of the main roads in Louisville. I was able to get to the library pretty easily by car, but the amount of zombies around is actually insane. I tried to get some use out of the shotgun, but it was obvious that it wasn't going to get the job done. I wanted to avoid using Molotovs, but that very quickly became the only way I was going to be able to clear out even a block of this area. I'll let a lot of this play out so you can witness the absolute shitstorm that is Louisville on insane population after a month of building up the peak multiplier. This was super intense and stress-inducing to say the least. I don't think I've ever been in a situation in Zomboid where there are this many zombies in a cell before, so I fell back on my years of COD zombie training and began kiting hordes around. This only worked in a couple instances though, as there were just too many zombies to handle. If I was able to group up 500, another 500 would appear behind me. And at this point, with fire spreading, I really just relied on that to do the work for me, and focused on dodging as many zombies as I could. And one of the things that's definitely easier said than done, for sure. I did find myself almost constantly sprinting to avoid being encircled, which was stressing me out as well since I know my fitness level isn't all that high, and that plays a factor into how quickly I become exerted, and if I become exerted here, I might as well just lay down and die and let the hordes do their thing. Well, I lit the library on fire. Kinda figured this was gonna happen, but it still sucks because that was the only objective for the day. If I'm lucky, maybe I can salvage a bookshelf or two and keep it moving. After spending the entire day baiting around thousands of zombies and ultimately doing more harm than good, I saw a potential exit and took my chance. After getting the van started, I tried to pull zombies together so that the fire would spread, before looping around and heading east. Now that the library is complete ash, I turn to another POI, being the library inside the mall. I'm still expecting a ton of zombies there, but it should be easier than what I'm trying to do right now. And surprisingly, at least to me, the mall was more clear than I was expecting, but there were still a few hundred zombies or so in the main area. I initially tried to just keep pulling the zombies out by shouting and then baiting them out the front door, but eventually a walking ball of fire made its way over and the rest is history. Figured this would be a good time as any to use the shotgun in order to pull in more zombies and just keep the fireball rolling. The best thing about this is, after dealing with the streets of Louisville, this is a walk in the park. By 5 AM the next morning, I was able to get inside the mall, which felt strangely empty now. I've logged a little over 7,500 kills at this point, over doubling where I was at just 24 hours ago. Anyway, with no zombies left to interrupt me, I looted the library, walking away with the rest of the carpentry books I needed, most of the first aid books, a ton of recipe magazines, and no generator mag. A little depressing, but we'll figure something out. At this point, I've been roaming for a day now, and I'm out of food, almost out of water, and running out of vitamins, so I began the journey back to my safe house. Along the way, I managed to find a sledgehammer on the ground outside of a workstation, so I scooped that up and made it back to base safely. I spent the rest of the day taking a small break from combat. I read all the recipe magazines that I'd gathered from the mall, and rebuilt the walls that the zombies had broken down during the heli event. This actually took some time since I had to cut down more trees to fill in the gaps, but other than that, I just enjoyed the peace for a day. The next morning, I set out for a nearby bookstore on foot. I figured there'd be a couple clusters to clear there, but made a stupid decision and grouped them into what ended up being two hordes that I just kept bouncing back and forth between. Eventually, I got a small opening, and I was able to quickly peruse the fantasy adventure sections of the bookstore, which unfortunately did not hold the generator magazine. After my time was up, I narrowly escaped out the back door. And headed back to base, where I was greeted by a group of zombies who broke down one of my garage doors. At this point, I'm not sure where else to look, so I just started going door to door through the neighborhood in the west, which ended up turning into more of a looting run since I came back with a backpack full of canned foods and then some, but still no generator mag. After waking up the following morning, I walked over to the apartments and just spam shouted to pull any nearby zombies out. After the area was all clear, I started by going door to door again, looking for the generator mag, which I finally found, ironically in the first apartment that I looted. Now that that's taken care of, I can go refuel all of my cars. All I need to do is actually clear out the gas station. I spent basically the entire day just walking down the road in that direction, checking out any zombie groups that I came across. I will say though, I'm starting to really feel like I'm doing some damage with short blunt weapons. There were a couple stretches throughout the day where I either two-tapped or one-shotted like 5 or 6 zombies in a row, and that's gotta be one of the most satisfying moments in Zomboid. As I came up to the Finnegan Research Group building, I got to witness an apple factory moment when the zombies were throwing themselves off the roof to try and escape. Eventually, I bit off a little more than I could chew, and tried to retreat back to the compound. I thought I had gotten away, until I turned around and got to watch like 200 zombies press their faces through the fence. After resting for an hour or so, I had the genius idea to load up an M14 and head back out onto the road. This went about as well as you'd expect, and within a couple hours, I'd amassed a horde of what I can only guesstimate was around 1,500 zombies. I took advantage of the zombie AI pathing here and looped them around before dipping through a couple buildings where they could inevitably all group up at, since that triggered my last seen location to all of them. I spent all of the next day regaining all the ground that I'd lost from the zombies spilling out of Finnegan's. Normally I'd show all the combat here, but it's literally like 45 minutes straight of combat, so I'll show some of the larger hordes and we'll move on. Sound like a deal? Alright, sweet, let's go. I was hoping I'd be able to reach the gas station yesterday, but here we are. That was the goal for today though. And although we still have a ways to go, and even once we clear out the zombies, I'll still have to come back, grab the generator, and do that entire setup process. One thing I kept thinking about was the potential to find another generator, so that I could leave one at the gas station and another at my base. There's a self-storage POI near me that I can hit up now that I have a sledgehammer, so I'll have to head over there at some point. There's also an abandoned car lot nearby that I can use for spare parts. Or I could grind out some skills and unlock the ability to hotwire cars and just take my favorites. We'll figure something out eventually though. For now, I just wanted to focus on getting to the gas station. One thing that I'm noticing that's beginning to drive me nuts as well is how much of a performance issue that bloodstains can cause. Even with it set to low, the sheer amount of zombies being beaten and stabbed to death, no disrespect to Jeffrey Dahmer, the bloodstains are starting to mount up, which is causing me to drop frames. Now, I don't like to brag about specs or anything, but I do have a pretty beefy PC, so when this shit happens, it's kinda like, alright, well I guess I'm being penalized for doing a good job. Alright, rant over. On August 15th, after getting an early start to the day and spending my entire morning working through all of the zombies in the area, I finally reached the gas station. From there, it was only a few hours of clearing out the nearby zombie groupings. While heading back to base to recover, I did get hit by a roaming horde that threatened to, once again, undo all of my progress. And because of this, I spent the rest of the day clearing out the zombies that had wandered over. At this point, I can reach the gas station and can safely walk there now with the generator as long as no hordes wander over from the west. In the span of just a few days, I've gone from under 3,000 kills to 8,400 zombies killed, almost tripling where we were at last episode. Today is going to be much more focused on taking care of some necessary grinds in order to make it easier to take on the rest of Louisville. Really, this is just taking care of the compound and knocking out some skills to give myself a better fighting chance. And with that being said, let's go ahead and get into it. First things first, we need fuel. It's our biggest concern. We'll need to fuel up the vehicles and then grab some additional gas to keep for future use. And before we do that though, we still have zombies to wipe out. Since the previous day, it seems that a couple zombies had wandered over, so we'll just have to take care of them if we want to fuel up in peace. After spending the morning fighting, I was able to successfully hook up the generator and begin refueling my van. Now, obviously, since the generator is turned on, it's going to attract some friends that we'll have to take care of as well. After fueling up, I was able to loot the gas station, leaving with a ton of food, over 30 water bottles and orange soda, and some empty gas cans. Oh, and a popsicle freezer. I still need to fuel my other two trucks and the empty gas cans, so I loaded up the black truck and set out again the following morning. I almost flipped the truck though, which was pretty sick, but other than that, it was basically the same process all over again. Drive over, fight the zombies, get gas, drive home. One thing I'm going to have to figure out here is the migrating zombies. It feels like every day I get another horde finding their way over to me. Anyway, after fueling up and making it back to base, I dealt with the zombies that followed me. Following the events of the morning, I wrapped up the carpentry level 3 book and headed downstairs to seal up one of the garage doors that had broke down a few days ago. That included cutting down several trees and hauling the logs back to base, completely exerted. Unfortunately, in the time that I was away pretending to be Paul Bunyan, a couple zombies had wandered inside the compound. Not having the stamina to fight, I chose to end the day and worry about them tomorrow. It was also around this time that the whole blood-stained clothes situation was starting to take a toll on me again. The 2 rain collectors that I was able to salvage were completely dry, so I'd either have to use my water coolers or wait for it to rain again. The next morning, I took out the remaining zombies and got to work refortifying the base. I finished building the walls in the garage and then barricaded all of the exterior facing windows before adding 2 doors at the entrance of the fire station. After all of that was taken care of, I switched focus to making more rain collectors. I needed more planks to get this done, so I headed out to cut down some more trees. Unfortunately, a couple zombies had broken through by the tennis courts, so I'll have to repair that as well. And with no stamina, I didn't want to risk fighting, so I dropped my log stacks on the ground outside and headed into base to rest up before continuing. I made my way back to the helipad where I built out 2 more rain collectors. I have the planks to pull it off, I'll just need to figure out the logistics of it that don't end up with me falling to my death. The following morning, I destroyed one of the walls of the helipad and built a ramp over to the fire station. The only problem? I'm one story off. Or so I thought. There's a pretty cool trade-off though. Apparently building wooden floors can phase you through walls and ceilings, landing me in the garage. On my second attempt, I used a sledgehammer to destroy a window on the second floor and built a platform from there to the roof of the garage that I was able to walk on. Moving to the west side of the garage, I built out another platform that connected to my original roof. After that, I destroyed the stairs on both the helipad and the fire station, replacing the stairs with sheet rope so that I'm able to get to safety with ease. During the process of building up the walkway, I did level up my carpentry to level 6, meaning I'm finally able to build out gates for my compound. I got to work the next morning by building out my first gate on the west side of the compound. With that completed, I turned to killing more trees so that I could both rebuild some more broken walls, as well as add the final walls needed to fill in the space between the gate. After building the eastern gate, I noticed a massive mistake in my wall building techniques. The south wall and the east wall are off by one tile. It's nothing super important or drastic, I can just add one more wall going east and west, but still, it just looks ugly now. I still needed some more logs to finish up the walls, but my wooden axe finally broke that afternoon, forcing me to start using some of my fire axes for trees. By that evening, I was finally able to completely secure the compound. With construction officially completed, we can start to focus on skill grinding. Now we'll need some books for that, and with the public library currently on fire, there's some symbolism there, but I'll let you guys draw your own conclusion to that. We'll need to head back to the mall. The goal here isn't to fight any zombies, which is hilarious to say considering the series is centered around killing zombies. I mean, we certainly can, we're just depressed and anxious, which will impact our ability to do any damage. Anyway, back to the skill books. We're looking for First Aid 1 and 4, Tailoring 2, 3, and 5, and farming books, the full set 1 through 5. Before starting though, I did go ahead and plant my cabbages inside the grounds of the compound, and by that afternoon was able to walk away with everything that I'd come here for. Not wanting to pull a massive horde of zombies back with me, I looped around to the south and then crouched through the gate before climbing the rope ladder back to base. Finally safe and secure, I headed over to the helipad where I washed all of my clothing before heading back to base and getting rid of my anxiety and depression through the power of reading Harry Potter for the 200th time. At this point, I've got tons of food and water, a safe route to my rain collectors, and nothing but time. So with that, I spent the next 3 days reading through Carpentry Level 4, Farming 1, First Aid 1, and Tailoring 2. No sleeping, no grass touching, just 3 straight days of knowledge. The skill books checked off the list for now, we can start the arduous process of grinding some skills that will be a necessity, starting with First Aid. If you don't know, the fastest way to level First Aid is by standing on glass barefoot. This is insanely fast, taking less than 60 seconds in real life to level from 2 to level 4 in First Aid. I'm not worried about dirty bandages and infections either, since I'll be constantly giving myself fresh wounds each time. Anyway, it was around this time that I heard zombies pounding on my gate, and when looking around, only saw a couple, which I figured would be an easy break from reenacting a scene out of Jigsaw. When I got down to the gate, I opened it to find something like 6 zombies instead of the 2 that I thought I'd be taking on. Luckily, Project Zomboid doesn't adjust injury speed reduction into aim, walking, so with my agility skills where they are, I'm able to pace with the zombies as long as I'm aiming at them. Now back to our scheduled programming. Honestly, the longest portion of this grind was simply just reading the books. With Slow Reader, it takes most of the day to read through a single book, and that allotted time only grows with each volume. For example, I started reading volume 5 at 4:10 p.m. and didn't finish it until 8:10 a.m. the next morning, 16 hours later. A couple of things to note with this method real quick. First one is that you can queue up events, which is why you see me constantly clicking the same 2 injuries. I've been able to stack up to almost 10 times with each injury, so you can just queue up a bunch of these removals and then step away if you need to. Another point to touch on is that I've never gotten killed by removing glass. It almost seems that at a certain point, the glass shards just stop damaging you. Now, don't take this to heart though, I've never fully tested it, but in my experience, I have never died doing this method. After a couple days of doing this, I was finally able to max out my first aid skill, stitch up my feet, and take some antibiotics, and then go to sleep. By the following morning, my stitches were already ready to be removed, courtesy of level 10 first aid. So I traded in the suture needle for some bandages and could finally focus on my next skill, which I'll need a considerable amount of thread for. Normally, I'd just walk outside and shred all of the clothing on the corpses littering the streets, but given that it's been like a week since I've set foot out here, a lot of these corpses have despawned due to the settings I enacted in an attempt to keep my game from running at 5 FPS as the bodies pile up. Luckily for me, several hordes had wandered over, so I spam shouted to pull them in and got to work. By the end of one full day of ripping sheets, I walked away with 85 thread, which, after consolidating all of it, left me with 24 full counts of thread. I need like 10 times that amount if I want to fully max out tailoring, so the next day, I headed back out down the road and spammed Q to pull in as many wandering zombies as possible before spending the entire day physically dominating as many zombies as I could get my hands on. Whenever I became exerted, I'd hop the fence in the junkyard and hide out there while the zombies tried to work their way around to me, before heading back out to continue the fight. By the end of the day, I was up to about 45 thread, which isn't nearly what I need to max out, but should be enough to at least get me through a couple levels. By this point, it was about 5 AM, so before heading up to bed, I went over and disassembled all of my electronic junk, or at least most of it, until I was able to hit electrical 2, which I'll need to start hot wiring cars. With that being said, it was already well into the next day, so instead of sleeping, I spent 4 hours pretending to be a heroin addict looking for wherever I chose to set down my dirty needles at, before grinding out 2 tailoring levels to end the day. After waking up the following morning, I began the tailoring grind, which was basically the same setup as first aid. The books take anywhere from half a day to an entire day to read, so I'd just alternate between leveling tailoring and reading until eventually running out of thread at tailoring level 5. From there, I figured I'd probably just be something that'd be better leveled throughout the series since it was already halfway to level 10. The last skill I'm focused on now is mechanics, since having the ability to hotwire cars will be a lifesaver. For that, I need mechanics level 2, which I was able to achieve pretty easily off of 3 cars within the compound. Originally, I had planned to end the episode here, but when I got back to base and was working on getting rid of my negative moodles, another heli event spawned, and since there hasn't been all that much combat in this episode, it was worth showing some highlights of the heli event at the end here. So, enjoy! I tried to big brain this event and moved into the neighborhood to the west of the compound since I knew it had some zombies nearby, but was safe enough that I could retreat if needed. While I was shredding clothing at the end of the fight, I foolishly let my guard down and was ambushed by about 4 zombies that had traveled ahead of a wandering horde. This was hands down the luckiest moment of the entire playthrough, and maybe even my entire time playing Project Zomboid, as I was somehow able to avoid getting pulled down and was able to walk away from the entire situation with only scratches and lacerations. No bites. So far, we're up to 8,794 kills after almost 2 months in Louisville. I'll need to relax for a couple days to let my injuries heal since my right arm is basically destroyed, but other than that, we should be ready to go for next time. I have a couple POIs marked on the map that should have some guns, weapons, and other things we can use to start making a dent in these hordes. And for anyone wondering, here's what my skills look like so far. Today we'll be heading all the way to the west side of Louisville to hit up an army surplus store sitting off one of the main roads. With that being said, let's get into it. Picking up almost immediately where we left off last, I need to heal up before heading back into the city. Even with first aid level 10, this is going to take a day or two, so I sat around the compound and read skill books to pass the time. By the end of the day, I had healed 2 of my injuries. While waiting on the remaining injuries to heal, I set up my generator on the roof to restore power and harvested and replanted my cabbages, giving me a solid food supply to last me for at least a few weeks. After that, I really just did random tasks around the base. I refilled some water bottles, washed my clothes, patched up some barricades as zombies had broken down, and then ran on the treadmill for a bit. On September 6th, I woke up and checked my bandages, but had no luck since I was still stuck with the same 3 injuries. Although they were just base wounds now, with no title of severe or moderate anymore, so that was promising. With nothing but time, I spent the morning working on tailoring some more before bringing a laundry bin to the helipad and washing all of my dirty clothes. On the 7th, I checked my bandages and found that I was down to just the laceration on my right hand, and even then, it didn't seem to be much of an issue when it came to swinging a weapon. I chose today to make my journey across the city. It was raining, so I was expecting some frame issues as I progressed, especially as the game tries to load in zombies into the correct cells, while I drive like an absolute lunatic. Eventually, I made it back to the library, which was still on fire. It was pretty cool to drive through the aftermath though, seeing ash covering the streets while zombies still continued to shuffle around. I didn't bring any Molotovs with me this time since I'm now 0 for 2 on attempting to clear areas without causing massive destruction to the location that I'm trying to loot. I ended up parking just to the north of the target location. When I got out of the car, I started spam shouting to group as many zombies as possible. The goal was to bait them into the factory and then loop around through a window and hop over the fence. Now, this worked initially, but I hadn't managed to pull any of the zombies around the military surplus store, which left me 2 choices. I could try fighting my way into the store, or I could keep trying to group zombies and pull them away. After spending like 4 hours just running in circles, I finally caved and headed back into the truck. It was a big risk to take my only nearby vehicle and use it to bait zombies away, given that if I crash or it breaks down, I'm essentially fucked, but I wasn't really sure what else to do. While this was going on, I kept thinking about the South Park episode where all the homeless people invade South Park and then the kids soup up a bus Dawn of the Dead style and drive down to California, but anyway. After pulling way too many zombies to count and baiting them up to the northern end of the map, I circled back and was able to finally get into ready prep. I didn't have much time since there were just too many zombies, but I did manage to grab some more ammo that I could use. Unfortunately for me, the biggest piece that could have gone wrong inevitably went wrong when I was unable to get back to my truck and was forced to begin my journey back home, on foot. After several stress-inducing hours, I finally made my way back to base that evening. This didn't go at all how I'd hoped it would, which was a huge bummer considering I was planning on using the ammo there to really begin making a dent in Louisville, so walking away with only a few boxes was a major letdown. That being said, some ammo is better than none, I guess. After spending the night doing some research, I found a gun store far to the south. It's super out of the way, but it's really the only idea I can come up with that doesn't involve walking into Louisville with an M14. In the morning, I began my journey down to the gun store on foot. So there's a ton of zombies hanging out around the area, and there's no real way to get around them. I was able to bait up pretty large hordes and move them out of the way to the gun store, but overall it didn't do much good. So I began working through any stragglers so that I could narrow down some of the zombies to help. After a couple minutes of this, I just said fuck it and pushed into the hardware store in search of a sledgehammer, since I realized I'd need one to break through the metal fencing inside the building. After a fair bit of chaos involving me almost getting quartered in a bathroom and then pushing through the Black Friday shoppers trying to force their way into the building, I just gave up on the premise of baiting them around and began looking for a house to hide in so that I could recover from my exertion. Initially, I thought I was safe after breaking into one of the back houses and finding a bedroom on the second floor to rest in. Until about 15 seconds later, when I was greeted by a small army of Jehovah's Witnesses flooding into the room. After somehow escaping and finding my way outside, I was able to get a car started and drove back to the fire station. The grind to unlock hot wiring is already coming in clutch. At this point, I was so desperate for a win that I just grabbed all of my boxes of .308 rounds, an M14, and some cabbages, hopped back in my car, and drove straight back to the gun store. Now there is one major trade-off to having a car that you literally give zero shits about. Anyway, I've got time to kill, so I whipped out the M14 and spent a good several hours just gunning down zombies while simultaneously pulling them together. After ditching the horde in a tree line, I circled back to the hunting supply, and basically just did the exact same thing but with a wrench and a hammer. After like 8 hours of fighting, I was finally able to sneak through to the hunting supply without being seen, and break down one of the metal fences. I didn't really get to loot anything though, since I had the sneaking ability of a main character on a TLC show. But I do have at least 6 brain cells to account for my lack of chromosomes, which gave me the ability to think of using a sledgehammer to break down a wall to escape out the back of the lodge without many zombies seeing me. There, I looped around and killed the zombies outside, before resting up on the bench, and eventually pushing back into the store. After the zombies were cleared out, I got to live out every Texan's fantasy and finally get an entire gun store completely to myself. To compensate for all the shit I was borrowing from here, I hotwired the car in the parking lot and siphoned fuel from my makeshift battering ram to use as transport. Wanted to hit up the hardware store up the road, but there were a lot of zombies over there, and I wasn't sure if it'd be truly worth it right now. But if I've learned anything from watching a movie about a coked out squirrel stealing food from a Karen in the suburbs... Hold up, pause. If you got that reference, let me know in the comments, because that movie was fucking awesome, and I feel like it never got the respect it deserved. Alright, I'm paused. Things didn't go as planned at all, which shouldn't come as a surprise by now, and after doing a quick walkthrough, I figured this wasn't worth it at all, and dipped out back to base. Now, as many of you are quick to point this out, this wouldn't truly be a series if there wasn't an unnecessary car crash, and while driving back to base, I wasn't paying attention and accidentally slammed into a fire hydrant, totaling my 27% engine quality car. Luckily, I was right next to the fire station, but that really didn't matter since some of the walls were busted down and the crash had alerted some nearby zombies that needed my attention. Now that we're starting to gather a stash, I'm a little more confident in giving the Ready Prep another shot. I'm planning on driving over with a van, but instead of baiting zombies to try to get in, I'm just going to bring a Desert Eagle and an M9 with tons of ammo and just start blasting, until I pull most of the zombies far from the store. You guys want to see something funny? Did you know that if there's too many zombies for the game to texture in, they just become silhouettes of the local anorexia patients? I'm just gonna burn through my ammo here for a bit and see if I can make any sort of dent in this group. So this isn't going anywhere. I've burned through almost 300 rounds of ammo so far, and I might as well just be throwing socks at them. There's zero chance I can get into the Ready Prep like this, so I chickened out once again and snuck through the back of the warehouse, where I looped back to my van and began my journey back to base. Normally I'd show the drive back, but PZ is so greatly optimized that I accidentally ascended to a new level of epic gamer that looks something like this. Anyway, there's no way I can get into Louisville to loot the Ready Prep, or really any POI in the heart of the city, not with the current ammo situation. No, I'll need at least triple, maybe even quadruple the amount I have now if I want to have any semblance of a fighting chance. But I do have a plan.
I had a goddamn plan!
I finally come up with a plan. You see, I've got all these sticks, and with the help of some kitchen knives and a couple chromosomes, I was able to turn those sticks into spears. 41 spears to be exact. And with those spears, we're gonna do what our small ammo stash couldn't do, and finally begin the journey of making some genuine progress towards clearing this city. Without over-encumbering myself, I can carry about 22 spears on me, which should allow me to make some decent progress given my maintenance being level 7, even with my spear skill being 0. With that being said, I think starting off the vid with a little montage should be fitting. By the end of the first day, I had broken about 8 spears, but leveled up twice. Even with all the zombies killed today, progress was incredibly slow. After all that time, I still hadn't made it past them all. I did, however, clear out the little shopping section with a gun store inside. After hotwiring a nearby car and connecting a trailer to it, I left it parked outside the gun store and headed home. The following morning, I loaded back up on spears, grabbed a sledgehammer, and made my way to the gun store, where the zombies had accumulated. After clearing them out, I destroyed the metal fencing inside the store and set foot inside. This place was absolutely loaded with 9mm, 38 Special, 7.62, and 44 Magnum rounds. But on top of that, it also had a ton of guns. Now, I didn't really need all of them, but I did grab a revolver, a Tech 9, and a carbine. After dropping everything upstairs, we're up to 32 boxes of 38 Special, 30 boxes of shotgun shells, and 21 boxes of 9mm. We'll get to use some of this eventually, but for now, it's back to spears, which brings us to our third day of this escapade. Today was really just busy work. I almost leveled up my spear skill to level 3, and I was finally able to push down the main road from the mall, up to the gas station down the road. There actually weren't as many zombies as I thought there'd be, but I'm sure that'll change once we get into the residential section a little further down the road. Getting an early start the next morning, I decided to finally check out the Humvee sitting on the main road that I've passed probably close to 50 times now. The only issue with it right now seems to be the fuel tank, so with that, I hopped in and drove back to base, grabbed the generator, drove back up to the gas station where I fueled up my new toy before heading back to the front lines. Do you guys remember just a couple minutes ago when I said there were no zombies around? Well, thinking back to one previous episode, I've still never learned that each building is currently holding hundreds, if not thousands, of zombies. Which I was not so subtly reminded of when I honked the horn before stepping out of the Humvee. My goal was to use the Humvee as a makeshift rest point, which inevitably led to some really cool moments. The consequences of my actions spread further than just a temporary setback, as the next day, it felt like the zombies had multiplied, and after only a couple hours, I was tripped up and, having no bandages on me, was forced to run all the way back to the compound to patch up. Since there were thousands of zombies roaming the area, I figured it was probably time for me to break out the shotguns and see what I could do. Equipped with 500 shotgun shells, I set off down the road once again, only this time, I didn't have to walk nearly as far, as several groups had split from the main horde and made their way just outside of the compound, which at this point has both gates broken down, making it incredibly unsafe. Early on in the fighting, I hopped the metal fence by the self-storage and held my ground while the horde slowly worked their way around until I was forced to hop back over before continuing my mission on foot. throughout the day, I had quite a few close calls, 2 of them coming within an hour of each other. First one came at around 2:20 p.m. when I barely managed to hop the fence after being surrounded. And the second, and much more dramatic one, came when I accidentally cornered myself, and as the hordes closed in, managed to shove my way through them, trip, get up, and hop a fence to safety. Truly one of my greatest escapes I've ever experienced at Project Zomboid. And in between that and the final close call, I managed to kill another couple hundred zombies with the Mossberg. And finally, at around 6:30, having not learned any lessons from the day, I repeated the exact same series of events as the last close call, slowly looping zombies through the self-storage until cornering myself once again, pushing through the horde, and scaling the exact same fence that I had climbed just hours earlier. As if all of that wasn't dramatic enough, I had one more close call at the end of the day when I was trying to get back into my Humvee. After retreating back to the base for the night, I swapped out the shotgun for the new carbine I'd picked up and set back out. This thing was actually pretty sweet. It's a lever action, and as long as you have decent aiming, you can one-shot most zombies. There's even the ability to hit collaterals, which should save some bullets. After spending most of the morning burning through over 300 rounds of 38 Special, I went back to the compound to swap out the carbine for the Tech 9. Now I only have one mag for the Tech, but I do have over 20 boxes of 9mm ammo, so I wanted to see what I could do with this thing. In short, it kinda sucks. I was expecting a full auto weapon that I could mow down zombies with, and what I got instead was something with a slower fire rate than an M9. I think I'll just keep hoarding that ammo for now, since I don't really have a powerful weapon to use it on. Now normally I'd end the video here, given that we've accomplished a ton, but we still have like 14 spears left or something like that, and I hate leaving things unfinished. So here's a compilation of me burning through the rest of my spears that I had at the compound. So a funny thing happened during all of this. At 2:20 p.m. on September 17th, another heli event was triggered, meaning that all of those days of work and hundreds of bullets fired to clear out the small section of the city was for nothing, as the heli event just pulled thousands of additional zombies into the area, completely flooding this section of the map. After finally burning through all 40-something spears, I headed back to the compound, where I harvested all of my cabbages, giving me around 130 fresh cabbages to shove my face with. After all the chaos of this episode, our kill count is up to 10,359 zombies, with 6,226 of those coming by fire. In order to really start putting a dent in the population, I'm going to need to get creative. I'm also going to need some firepower. Now, we have a decent amount of ammo from 2 gun stores, but it's not going to be enough to do anything significant. Because of that, we're going to head down to the military checkpoint and see if we can find anything useful. If not, well, that's why Molotovs exist. Ideally, I'd like to grind out some kills without using fire so I can get that desensitized trait taken care of. We don't have to worry about becoming extremely panicked and stressed all the time, which should make the playthrough significantly easier. The goal for the military checkpoint is to find some more 5.56 ammo and some magazines for the M16. But since we don't have that right now, I figured it'd be a good time to break out the M14, so I have 32 boxes of ammo for it. With that being said, I chose the Humvee since it was the most prepared to take a beating, attached my trailer to the back of it, and set out for the military checkpoint. I figured the easiest route would be to head south, taking the path to the gun store, and then heading west on the highway, which should connect me to the main road that leads right to the checkpoint. Obviously easier said than done, but I don't really have many other options at this point. Now, sometimes I just forget how massive Louisville is. To think it took me several in-game hours to drive from one end of the city to the other, when you can get from almost every other city in the game in under 1 hour, really speaks to the scale of this place. Oh, also, for anyone who's doubted my driving, I was able to successfully navigate a massive horde with the Humvee and trailer by slowly working my way through a small opening, and then looping all the way back around for a clean 360 and heading back down the road, leaving approximately 500-ish zombies shambling behind me. The best part of that is, as soon as I thought I was in the clear, I reached the 4-way intersection and got hit by another, most likely equally sized horde that I had to navigate through as well. Although this one wasn't nearly as hard due to the amount of open space I had to work with. I arrived at the checkpoint around 5 PM and immediately got to work with the M4 team. Now, I know I don't have nearly enough bullets to clear the area, but my goal is to at least thin them out enough that I'll be able to loop a large horde around and sneak into the base relatively undetected. If you're wondering why I chose to just start shooting instead of using melee weapons, the answer is actually pretty simple. I didn't want to waste any stamina killing a few zombies with a hammer or a knife, since I'm going to need every ounce of it that I can for sneaking and crouch sprinting in the military base. Like that evening, after burning through a few hundred rounds, I was able to circle back to the checkpoint entrance, where a smaller grouping was waiting for me. I wasn't too concerned with these zombies though, since there was only a couple of them, and I could just outwalk them while looting as long as I was careful. The tents were my primary targets because they held crates that I could spawn 5.56 ammo and M16 mags that I could hoard, which turned out to be exactly the case. I don't really care about the clothing available since I have leather jackets and other clothes that I can use for better protection. Outside of that, I found a ton of hunting knives, which I was excited to get to use later. If you don't know, after a certain fitness level, you effectively lose 0 stamina when using short blade weapons. If you're looking for an excuse to use them, they're by far the best option for low fitness builds. After looting all of the tents on the western side of the checkpoint, I had accumulated 26 boxes of 5.56 ammo, 13 M16 mags, 16 boxes of 45 ACP, and 12 hunting knives. With the western side looted, I turned my attention to clearing up the zombies in the area so that I can move more safely through the checkpoint. It was too dark to risk looting any of the tents at this point, so I just sat around and waited for dawn to start hitting the tents and locations on the eastern side as well. Eventually, I was able to move the Humvee up the road since it was a lot easier to loot with, and took some extra time to clear out more zombies before heading back in. After wrapping up my looting run, I came away with 42 boxes of 5.56, 34 boxes of 45 auto, 8 boxes of shotgun shells, 21 M16 mags, a G17 pistol, an M16, an M19, a Mossberg 500, along with 13 hunting knives and a plethora of attachments. Given that there's tens of thousands of zombies between me and the compound, I decided to load up all the M16 mags and sleep in the Humvee before heading down the road on foot to take on those two massive hordes that gave me so much trouble when I was driving in. Even with a bad condition M16, everything was going smoothly, albeit slow due to the gun constantly jamming. until around noon when my M16 just flat out broke. Since I was hungry and dealing with a few negative moodles, I chose to just head back to the compound and reset, with the plan of coming back down here to continue the push up the main road. When I got back to base, I just dumped all the ammo in the pile on the second floor and sat there trying to think of a plan of what I should do next. In a nice callback to episode 4, I do still have an M16 that was used as a zombie's leg, so I decided to grab that and 34 boxes of 5.56 ammo that I had sitting around, and set off the next morning to push into the heart of Louisville on foot. I'd actually forgotten about the hordes hanging out around the mall from the heli event days ago, so that caught me by surprise when I had to walk through hundreds of them just to get back to the main road. I contemplated stopping and just pushing through all of them, but figured there wasn't much of a point since they'd all just kind of wander back over to me anyway. As I reached the car dealership, I did my best Deshaun Watson impression and whipped out my M16. After a couple hours of this, my second M16 broke, and I found myself walking back to base once again. At this point, I was so sick of constantly dealing with shitty guns that I grabbed a Mossberg and over 600 shells for tomorrow, before spending the rest of the day just boiling water. The next morning, I set out with my 600 shotgun shells and proceeded to spend the entire day pumping zombies full of over 400 of those 600 shells. Eventually, I found myself looping through buildings after I got bored of kiting, and found myself in a hardware store, where I found a machete and some more short blunt weapons before getting overwhelmed and retreating back to the open road. Once the sun went down and the rain came out, it was time to call it a night. Heading back to base was actually way more difficult than I was anticipating. It was pitch black out, and on top of that, the rain made it near impossible to see anything. So I resorted to just using click to walk and just spamming the direction I wanted to go in. After opening the remaining boxes of shotgun shells, I had just over 250 remaining, which isn't really enough to do anything, so I grabbed a Glock and 15 M9 mags, along with a few hundred rounds of 9mm ammo, and set my eyes in the baseball stadium. Zombies had destroyed my rope ladder, so I had to take a running start and aim for the bushes. Now I know some of you are probably thinking, why didn't he just use the rope ladder inside, and I have a pretty simple answer for that.
Shut up, bitch! Oh my god!
It wasn't until I started walking that I realized that I was already tired, and it was raining, which was no fun for anyone, which is a twisted way of saying I found myself hiding at the compound working on Rule 1, while I waited for the storm to pass. After waking up the next morning to no rain, I took my chance and set out for the stadium. The roads leading to the stadium were completely swarmed, as if this isn't normal by now, but I managed to make it to the stadium late that morning and found it completely overrun, which makes sense because if you were looking for a place to find thousands of brain-dead, loudmouth creature lunatics, a baseball stadium would be the first place you'd check. Anyway, I thought it was going to be incredibly difficult to get inside, but after finagling my way through people trying to buy tickets to nothing, I found a side entrance that I was able to sneak in through and began making my way through the stadium. Eventually, I ended up cornering myself when I tried to sneak through a side door and found myself on a catwalk with a dozen or so zombies. I paused here to think about what my options were, but I also think this is a good stopping point for today and can also serve as a cliffhanger while I contemplate if I really want to continue this series or not. At this point, I think it's time to have a conversation about this playthrough, and how it was inevitably doomed from the start, due to both how the game is designed and a failure on my end to recognize these issues before starting the playthrough. So, issue number 1, zombie migration. Something I should have disabled at the start, but I completely missed in my initial settings walkthrough. Zombie redistribution occurs every 12 hours, and the game does this for an entire cell at the same time. This means that every 12 hours in-game, thousands of zombies will flood back to a recently cleared cell, effectively removing any progress I'll ever be able to make in-game. Rotonaru has a great video on this, I'll link it down in the description, you guys should definitely go check it out as well. Normally, this isn't an issue in a regular playthrough, but on insane population settings, the game moves literal tens of thousands of zombies all at once. Think of a helicopter event every 12 hours to the cell you just cleared out the night before. This wouldn't be the end of the world by any means if that was all that was happening. I mean, progress would be more difficult to show, but eventually the numbers would decrease enough that it'd be noticeable in each video. This brings us to the second problem with this current playthrough, zombie spawning. The way that Zomboid works is that zombies inside of buildings are only spawned in if you're close enough to the building and have visible sight inside that same building. This means that you could essentially walk up to the building and set off a siren while spamming Q, and they wouldn't spawn until you looked in the window or opened the door. Again, not a big deal in a normal playthrough. The big issue comes when you think about just how many buildings are in Louisville. This applies to every house, every gas station, every singular building in the entire game. If you remember from earlier episodes just how many zombies are in each building, scale that immensely, as we'd have to go door to door just clearing each building one at a time, as they spawn anywhere from 12 to 50 zombies per house. All of this isn't even factoring in buildings like apartment complexes, which, from my best estimate, would contain thousands of zombies spread over the course of a couple dozen rooms on each floor. Duck's Zombie Building Spawn Fix is a mod that addresses this, but this brings us to our third problem. The first 9 episodes of Liberating Louisville were recorded, edited, and completed before 2023. I know that's crazy to say, but the last time I've even opened the save file before recording the footage you're seeing on screen was December 13th, 2022. Since it's been over 4 months since I opened the save file, the world version was on 194, when the current game is on 195. This, in turn, creates a new save file. Not anything out of the ordinary, but what I found was that when I opened the playthrough to continue where I left off, the zombies had despawned and then respawned just outside of my current loaded area. After talking with some other players, we came to the consensus that this effectively reset zombie spawns for the new save file, completely undoing all of my original work. This is what you saw at the beginning of the video when I first spawned in, and there's no zombies there, even though I haven't touched the file since it was paused almost 4 months ago. My kill count also shows thousands from weapons and fire, but my kill total is somehow stuck on 1. This is all to say that I can still play the game and continue making episodes, but what would end up happening is I'd have to start from scratch, head into the residential area, kill all the zombies on the roads, go door to door to spawn in the zombies and then clear those out, and do that repeatedly, all while dealing with zombie migration, constantly redistributing zombies into the neighborhoods for me to continue fighting, which would get incredibly tedious for me, and to be honest, would probably get boring to watch from a viewer perspective. With all that said, I think it's time to say I failed this challenge. Leaky Bum is still alive and well though. He's not bitten or dead or anything, this save file is just too far gone to continue playing in my opinion. Because of that, I think it's time for him to move on to greener pastures, and maybe move to a different city to liberate. Who knows? I hear Raven Creek is beautiful this time of year. Thank you all for the support over the last 4 months. I had an absolute blast with this series, and I'm excited to take what I learned from this one and apply it into a future series built off the foundations that this one laid. When I first released episode 1, I had just over 50,000 subscribers, so it's insane to me that I'm ending it after just hitting 100,000. A lot has changed over the last few months, and I'm so thankful that you all enjoy my videos. It's allowed me to support my family and do this full time, and that's something I'll forever be grateful for. I appreciate you all, and as always, thanks for stopping by.